Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy, Jon Jeremy, with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Coming at you on, well, it's a pretty good day to be a Knicks fan. I would proffer, maybe perhaps others would reasonably disagree. And I'm very excited to talk to someone. The last time I talked to him, I forget what happened the last time I talked to him. But it's been a good week since. So Jeremy Cohen, we're recording this on Sunday morning. Happy Sunday morning to you.
Happy Sunday, John. Yeah, it's not much has really happened since our last regularly scheduled pod. Just a seismic trade followed by 4 straight wins. But other than that, it's been pretty low key.
Low key. What is? I don't even know what. If we should go back one day and what has been the most low key week we've ever had doing this pod? I don't know that whatever that winner would be. I don't know if that would even qualify as low key. There's always some shit happening.
That's what probably early in the season where it's like, look, it doesn't matter. I mean, it does, but we'll figure it out.
You very much had the "it doesn't really matter" vibes early on the season, and kudos to you because we have come a long way since 2 and 4. And I don't know. I would even argue that we've come a long way since the conversation a week ago. So let's just do a quick recap of the week in review. It looks like I see 4 games, and it looks like I see 4 wins here for the New York Knickerbockers, starting with a win over the Timberwolves by 6 points. That was a game in which they went up by 20 in that game, right? Or whereabouts. But it was it was a nice win. A win over the Bulls by 16, in which they took control of that one for sure. A win over the Philadelphia 76ers that I'm still not quite sure I can process. It's a 36-point victory. And then what wound up as a 16-point victory over Washington. I was saying last night, it's like we blew out the Wizards twice. That's my take of that game. You know?
Yes, I can see that. To me, it felt like playing the Sixers twice. I kid. But even still, it was look, we're talking about a team being able to win both games of back-to-back with both games on the road. That is impressive. Was it Julius who said, "Don't play with your food"?
No.
And it's exactly true. The Knicks are 10-1 between or against teams that are below 500. So take care of business against teams you have to. And you look different now. So keep moving it along.
Yeah, so this week's show, Jeremy is again. We're always trying to get out ahead of the curve. It's not that it's that far out ahead because obviously from the moment quickly got traded, the conversation, and actually really from the moment like the new backup unit tried itself out and was like, hey, maybe this isn't tenable. The conversation has turned to backup point guard. Do we need a backup point guard? Where are we going to get a backup point guard? What is the backup point guard going to cost? So Jeremy has a cap or no cap today. About that before we really get into the hot and heavy of trade season, which by the way, it's kind of here. Trade deadline's a month from now as you're listening to this. So we're just going to do one takeaway from the past week for each of us. I do you have one? I'll turn to you first because I've had the opportunity to go on post games for 3 of these 4. So I'll tee it up for you.
Knicks are playing exactly how I would gather the front office wants the team to play. A lot of selfless passing, from my vantage point, right? I mean, I obviously really do miss much of the joy that Emmanuel quickly brought to the team. You could see it in Toronto when he's skipping around, hitting threes, doing all of that. But there was something about this season that changed for me. And I can only speak for myself, but watching the games up until the OG Anunoby trade, it kind of felt not like purgatory, right? Because that purgatory is not the right word to use, but
it might be.
But from an entertainment standpoint, I kind of feel like I hit my ceiling of this unit. And it wasn't until I saw the report afterwards about Tibbs hitting his ceiling with that version of the team, according to insiders of the front office.
I missed that. Wait, hold on. I missed it. Yeah. So maybe you should inform our listeners because I feel like some of them might have missed it.
There was something written about an internal belief that perhaps Tom Thibodeau had maximized that current team's abilities, and which I think is a fair critique. But it wasn't until I read that where I was like, you know what? I felt that as a fan, from viewing it, because I don't want to disparage players as they're out the door, but I had just kind of had it with the way that it was operating under RJ Barrett. Just how he was playing, how he fit into the grand scheme of things, knowing this is the blessing and the curse of being able to look at and like scrutinize a salary cap until the cows come home, where you're kind of like, it's inevitable that this player is going to be moved, whether it's a star trade or to get the wing help that they desperately need. And so viewing it in that lens very much felt to me of, all right, let's just get a trade done. Let's do this. Come on. And it kept going and going. And then RJ's game was not helping, and it was getting worse, and his shooting compounded all those feelings. And it's unfortunate that Quickly was involved. It's more than that too, where I won't bore folks at home, but tax apron stuff next year and all these other aspects of his contract that I'm sure played into it. But I wasn't enjoying watching this team quite in the same way that I was, say, 7-8 months ago. And granted, that was the playoffs. The time leading up to it was a lot of fun, but it just felt like we need to take that next step. And it happened. Obviously, it felt like pulling the rug out from underneath a good group of folks and losing the entertainment value and the emotional support of seeing these players that we feel like we know personally because they've been on our team. And even if we don't, we just have had that kind of access. And for me, it's been a little bit more capitalist, so to speak. It's like, yeah, it's these players. I like them, but what's the grand scheme here? What are we building towards? And that move felt like building towards something next. And the proof has been in the pudding the last 4 games, where you hope that this stays consistent, and you hope it's exactly like the Josh Hart trade and the impact that it had on the Knicks last season. And I believe that it absolutely can be, but from an entertainment standpoint, it has shifted from, oh, the Knicks are on and I'm going to enjoy watching them because I like watching the Knicks and it's my job to cover this team. And now it's, no, let's clear my schedule no matter what I want to. This is appointment viewing. It has to be. I love watching this, and I just have been thrilled as a result. So I'm really excited for whatever would be next, but it's hard. It's easy when they win, but even if they weren't winning these games, I still would feel like we're headed in the right direction. So that's my one big takeaway.
That's great. I'm gonna save my one big take. I'll lead into my one big takeaway with a couple of responses to what you said in regards to comparing it to the Hart trade. Obviously, 9-0 after Josh Hart, and then now we're at 4-0 after OG. I think they're cousins more than like identical twins in this sense, which is that Hart slotted right in without any adjustment because you weren't losing. Obviously, you weren't losing a rotation player in that trade because Cam Reddish had already been removed from the rotation. It was, and what you were losing, I mean, at that point, you were losing Deuce minutes, and was that it? I'm trying to think who was in the rotation before the Josh Hart trade that wasn't in the rotation after the Josh Hart trade. It was just Deuce, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. So okay. So
Cam had already been pulled.
Yeah, but with all due respect to Deuce, and we'll talk. I'm sure Deuce will come up in this episode. Like he is going to come in this episode because we're talking about backup point guards. Like that was not a loss, you know. And the hard fit was so seamless. At the same time, while it elevated their ceiling, I don't think it fundamentally altered what they were capable of. This trade on the wrong night, so I'll start with the negative. On the wrong night, could lower. I don't know if you want to say lower their floor, lower their ceiling. It could make them worse on the wrong night against the wrong team, whether it's, maybe Brunson has an off night or Brunson's in foul trouble or God forbid Brunson gets hurt or just like a team with a strong backup unit. Like whatever. There's scenarios where the current backup situation without Emmanuel Quickly, they could be worse off because of it. But the benefits of it and what it does to them that they were not able to do before. Like Josh Hart amplified what was. This makes them something altogether different. And that was my big takeaway, and I said it, I was in SNY Studios when the trade went down and we had to do like a live segment, right after. And I think I told you that day, for me, this trade, not more than anything, but a big part of this trade was let's see how much juice we could squeeze out of this current group by inserting this piece. And maybe we're not ready to have that conversation yet because is there still a need for a playmaker off the bench? We're going to get into that today, but we're closer to seeing that. And yeah, that's all I could. That's it. I'm good. I was gonna do a thing about the minutes and like how it kind of again took away. It was to what you were saying, right? Like the minutes thing had become such an issue, and it kind of, and I'm in a unique position where I get on in front of here and listen to people's frustrations for an hour or 2 hours or whatever after every game. So I know for me personally, my reaction to this trade was definitely colored by the fact of like, I'm not going to have to hear people complain about Emmanuel Quickley's minutes anymore. And like, that's not fair to anyone who has to listen to me because that shouldn't be a factor. But like, just speaking bluntly, it is. And, yeah. And here we are. So anything else before we move on to the cap or no cap?
Yeah, just that it also freed up Quinn Grimes.
If you didn't have pieces here to step in and actually benefit from the situation, that'd be one thing. You do, and I think we're seeing it. So, yeah, great call on Grimes. All right. On that note, everybody's favorite niche basketball podcast sub thing that we do, cap or no cap.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cap or No Cap. Today, we're going to be talking about the point guard position, specifically the backup point guard position. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is early. Why are you showing this to me? And the answer is, as I mentioned on the live stream, I'm tired of things that I want to say being taken, like happening, and I'd like to get out ahead of them. So that's why we're here.
Selfish prick.
Yes, 100%. So I would just like to not be like, damn it, I had that, but it's gone. Instead be like, there it is. So in terms of this, I mean, the bottom line is, yes, the Knicks need to focus on finding someone to have, but at that point guard position. But the real long-term goal remains the Knicks need a superstar. That is what they're in the market for. It's not just for an upgrade. That needs to be the number one goal. And then you work backwards from there. And then you get to the short term, which is the Knicks need another ball handler or playmaker. Question is, can you achieve both of those goals? And if so, how can you do it? Well, just a quick peek at the finances. For this season, the Knicks are $5.1 million below the luxury tax. They're also $9.9 million below the hard cap. As a reminder, they were hard capped because of the Donte DiVincenzo signing. The Knicks won't likely spend that 9.9. If anything, they'll get as close to 5.1 as they need to be because they don't want to be a tax team. And frankly, they don't need to be one. They have two player exceptions. Number one, the $6.8 million traded player exception that they acquired for Obi Toppin, or using Obi Toppin going out, and the $5.2 million trade player exception they acquired thanks to the RJ Barrett trade. I say the RJ Barrett trade because the Knicks and the Raptors split up their big trade into two trades, one being RJ for OG, which gave the Knicks a traded player exception, and the other, which was Emmanuel Quickley for Malachi Flynn and Precious Achiuwa, which gave the Raptors a traded player exception. And then finally, the Knicks may have a $7.8 million disabled player exception that is determined by the Fit to Play panel, independent doctors. That might happen. As another reminder, you cannot combine exceptions and they operate differently. We talked in a previous pod about the differences between traded player exceptions and disabled player exceptions. So if you're curious about that, I suggest going on that one. But that's where the Knicks stand. Now, I just want to take a quick look at what this roster is, specifically in the lens of this summer, right? So as of right now, the Knicks have Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson, Mitchell Robinson, Josh Hart, Donte DiVincenzo, Quentin Grimes, Jericho Sims, and Deuce McBride all under contract. That's 2, 4, 6, 8. 8 players that they have. They have 8 controllable contracts and movable money. And now what you're probably thinking here is, let's say the Knicks have a major star trade. What could they do? Well, yes, they could theoretically guarantee Evan Fournier's team option if they weren't to trade him. But it also comes down to a math concern. Now, there's more to this math. I am not going to show all of my cards today because that would spoil a future cap or no cap, which I really don't want to do because I've already had one be spoiled. So why would I shoot myself in the foot when I'm already getting shot in the foot?
Take the gun away.
Exactly. Leave the cannoli or take the cannoli. I always get this mixed up. Right. Why would you leave the cannoli? It's a perfectly good cannoli.
Yeah.
Have your cannoli and eat it too. So, but I want to focus also just very quickly here on Deuce because he's not going to be a focal point for this presentation. And it's not because I don't believe he can't progress. We've already seen in the Philly game where he had 4-4 shooting in just that first quarter for
4 threes in the first and some nice
points. Yeah. And he is 9 of 20 on the catch and shoot from 3 this year, which is quite good. Obviously, it's a smaller sample size, but there's progress there. And my hope would be if the Knicks make any move whatsoever, that they would do it closer to the deadline because Deuce McBride has been getting important reps. And I don't know if he is going to be a future primary creator. He has functioned more off ball and he's found some success there. I don't know if he will be on this team 6 months from now. The Knicks have certainly created an opportunity where if they needed to consolidate salary, they have given themselves an additional option in Deuce McBride. Yes.
I just jump in real quick. Like if you don't, like I'm high on Deuce McBride. I've been incredibly impressed. Like I'm sure a lot of people have with the last couple games. You even saw it in the Washington game. And again, the Wizards are a 6-win team. And that game got this much uncomfortable. And what does Tibbs do? Let's stop fucking around. I'm going to get the win. And he puts Brunson back in. Like, so there's a minutes wear and tear concern for the rest of the season. But more importantly, like, if you're like, well, Brunson's going to play 40 minutes a game in the playoffs anyway, what's the big deal? Well, I would argue that they'd have come back to New York for Game 7 against Miami had it not been for, and I'm not putting it on Deuce, but like the Deuce minutes in Game 6, like they didn't. Did they score in those minutes? Well, whatever the hell they did, it wasn't good. And so, like playoff series are won and lost in the margins in those 5-minute stretches, 6-minute stretches, or like 3 minutes a half. That's all we're talking about here, right? But those could make the difference in a series. So again, this is not Deuce McBride hate. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you pretty much just said that. So that's not what this is about.
Absolutely. And I'll be honest, you're 100% right. I didn't think I was going to be triggered on my own cap or no cap by the Miami game, but it's completely accurate. I mean, the Knicks needed a floor general. No, it's fine. It was the right thing to do. But they needed a floor general and Deuce is taking those strides. But also if he doesn't have it, Tibbs is going to pull him quickly. It's not going to work out in that sense. And the other thing, again, we talked about this on the live stream. You hope, right? You knock on wood that Jalen Brunson manages, doesn't have any nagging injuries, stays healthy, all that jazz. But if he doesn't, then you're left in a very precarious position. But then if you still think about the larger goal in mind, which is that if a star became available, the math would not shake out in the Knicks' favor. They would have less salary that would be able to be moved. And again, even if you have Fournier, you're still coming up a bit short. So what does this mean in terms of thinking about that superstar that might come on the market if they come on the market, and also addressing a position of need that has to be addressed? Well, we look at the criteria. And number 1, no expiring contracts. If you are on an expiring contract, you are not welcome here in New York. And the reason is sign and trades. It requires a sign and trade if you want to use any of that salary. Because if we go back real quick, if the Knicks found themselves in a position where they had to make that trade, there's a very strong likelihood that they would dig too much into their depth, or they're not going to trade Jalen Brunson, and they're probably not going to trade Julius Randle. So then are they cutting into their starters? Which again, they could do. But also, why do that if you can completely avoid it by bringing in more money to help you? And that's why when the math gets weird with a sign and trade, it just doesn't help you out. So you also need cooperation from that player. That player has to want to go to the location. For example, let's just say Donovan Mitchell says, I want out. And you have to say, hey, a player that we acquired, what if we sign and trade you? Yeah, Tyus Jones. Let's say, hey, Tyus, would you like to go to Cleveland? And Tyus Jones says, no. And you say, okay, great. So now we have to work out a 3-team deal where you want to go to, and the math has to work out. Do you want to go to Detroit? No, you don't. Okay. Well, crap. So that's why you just don't want to get in that spot. And the Knicks have made a point of saying, if you don't agree to a contract that we like, specifically for younger players, but even some older players too, if we feel we don't have the runway and the control that we need, we will show you the door. They didn't give Cam Reddish an extension, and he was traded. Emmanuel Quickley could not agree to an extension. He was dealt. They moved Obi Toppin before the word extension even was messaged to him. So they like to have that level of control. And this essentially rules out, to your point, Markelle Fultz. That's one option, for example. These are just all players that are, point guards who are on expiring contracts. Tyus Jones, Alec Burks, Monte Morris, Killian Hayes. And it gets to the point of, you also need more salary than Fournier's $19 million. Not a lot, but a bit more. And again, I will elaborate in depth on that in the offseason, but you need to have more money than $19 million in order to truly get to where you need to go. So I'll turn it over to you. What are your thoughts?
I just want to say briefly, because again, I'm always trying to think of like what are people's reactions listening to this. I would guess that given how the Knicks have played this week, there are a fair bit of people, myself included, who are like, well, wait a minute, maybe we need to re-examine the whole star trade thing. This team is really awesome right now, and maybe something as small as a point guard like Tyus Jones or whoever is enough to get them to a place where they can, let's say get to the second round or win a tough second round series. And my response to the argument that I just concocted in my head, no straw man here, is that I don't think that that's the right way to look at it. And I think instead you have to look at it from the perspective of, even if the front office themselves believes there's a possibility of the scenario that I just said unfolding, the notion that they're going to box themselves into a corner where it precludes or excludes, I don't know precludes the mere possibility of making a trade for a star without having to give up a piece you really don't want to give up, because that kind of defeats the purpose of the thing. You want to get the star to add to your main pieces. The notion that they're going to put themselves in that position, I do believe is a fraught one. The one caveat to that is the Randall piece of it all, because he does have a big salary, and like, are there scenarios out there where the right star added to Brunson and Anunoby and then presumably Hart and DiVincenzo and whoever, like, yeah, but again, you're limiting yourselves, because how many of those stars are there really out there? And is it more likely that a star or a star-ish player is going to come where it's like, okay, well, that wouldn't be enough with just Brunson and Anunoby, but with Randall and Brunson and Anunoby, well, now maybe we're cooking with a little gas. So to me, this is really all about optionality and not taking yourself out of anything before you have the requisite information to know if you're going to be in the thing to begin with. I hope I phrased that okay.
You did. It's purely flexibility. It's not doubting.
Flexibility. There you go.
It's not omitting Deuce from the equation. It's not saying the Knicks shouldn't evaluate other options. It said, wouldn't you want as many options on the table? And so if you can get the same production or similar caliber production from a player who is under contract next season as you would from a player who is not, and you can have one versus the other, why wouldn't you take the one that actively helps you or could help you versus the one that can only hurt you if the biggest names on the market suddenly become available? And we're sitting here like, damn, I really wish the Knicks had considered this. This is the moment where they consider that. Yeah. It's at this point. So when I see names about expiring free agents, it's just kind of like, well, it just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't work within the flow of how the Knicks need to operate. So with all that said, let's talk about players next season that have salaries above $20 million. Chris Paul, he's got a non-guaranteed option. Just hurt his hand.
Yeah.
He's going to be out for some time. Also doesn't matter because the reality is there's too much incoming money.
Yeah.
There is no scenario. Let me rephrase. There's Evan Fournier's salary. We all know that if the math had to work, he'd be the guy going out. But you need to add more salary to get to someone like Chris Paul anyway. And even if you added Quentin Grimes, because you're not going to add really any of the other rotation pieces. You're not going to add Mitchell Robinson, and Deuce McBride can't be traded until I believe June 30th. So you're not really going to get him anyway, even if you wanted him. And there's not a whole lot of benefit to having that salary because it's probably too much anyway in the offseason. Jordan Poole, same thing. Too much incoming money. It sounded like a sneeze, but it could have also just been.
No, that was vomit. And that was vomit that came up at my throat.
There was. Fair enough. I couldn't see. I just heard it, and that's the accurate.
Be happy you
reaction.
can't smell it.
Yeah, I'll say yeah. Tyler Hero. Again, I don't see the Knicks and the Heat trading with each other. Also, Tyler Hero wouldn't be the primary ball handler, so to speak. Just an option of a player, but not a realistic one. Anthony Simons, I just don't see why the Blazers would be moving him at this point in time. Dejounte Murray, who we've certainly talked about. The question is, would the Hawks move him? Seems that the Hawks would move him. A follow-up question could be what the Hawks want in return. We can see about that. Terry Rozier is 29 years old. Defense is just abysmal. It's the sort of thing where, yes, you get that contract that can help do exactly what I described, but if he's not going to stay on the floor because of how bad the defense is, then there's a certain limit. We can be a little bit choosy in terms of the players that walk into the door and not just, hey, because you are a point guard, because you have a contract that fits this criteria, you absolutely should be here.
I want to say one thing really quick about Rozier. I don't have the defensive VPM numbers. I'm sure you do. I'm sure they're awful.
They are.
The cleaning the glass number, the Hornets, who are not exactly a team that has are gifted with all kinds of great defenders coming off the bench. They're 5.6 points per 100 possessions worse with Rozier on the floor. That's in the 13th percentile league wide. That's awful. The one thing I do want to say about Rozier, and I will admit that I've always had an odd morbid fascination with him as a player, because he has the moments where if you catch him in the right 5-minute stretch, you're like, holy shit. And then you catch him at the wrong 5-minute stretch and you're like a different kind of holy shit. I do wonder though, in general, and you could really, this could be said about almost any player on a losing team who has some level of pedigree, would the effort level upon coming here rise to the point where it not makes them suddenly a good defender, but where it's a passable situation. That's the only thing I want to throw out there for Rozier, and I guess for anybody else, who has poor defense on a losing team. Yeah,
I just feel as though you probably get a quick hook with that level of defense from Tibbs. There needs to be a minimum requirement of what you can and can't do,
unless the offense is so otherworldly. And I don't. That's
this year.
He's having a great year. Yeah,
he is. But will it be consistent enough where it overcomes the difficulty on the defensive end? I don't see it. Yeah. Bruce Brown, I don't know why the Pacers would move him. Not because he's been a standout. He's actually been probably somewhat disappointing, especially considering the money they gave him to get to the cap floor. But also just he's not going to run your offense. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for him. Malcolm Brogdon, can he stay healthy? He's certainly missed games due to poor health. He was looked at as someone that you couldn't really acquire this past summer due to injury. Lonzo Ball, player option. Well, he's not healthy. He's not going to help you this year. So these are examples of players.
All but ruled out, right? For this year?
Yeah.
Maybe not officially, but that's the understanding is he's
right. This is the sort of thing where you're like, hey, if we needed a little bit more money and take on a tiny bit of a sweetener, could we do that? But it's not worth it because that's just not the position that the Knicks are currently in.
No.
So those are salaries for next year that are above $20 million. And let's look at salaries that are below $20 million. Got Marcus Smart. I don't really know why the Grizzlies would move him. They're finally John Morant back. They're doing some winning. I believe they're 6-4 in their last 10. Don't see them acquiring him to move him.
I just want to note for anybody who may have missed it, wait, now I'm double checking myself to make sure it was actually in his report, and this wasn't just something he told us offline. No, I think it was in the report. Fred reported that the Knicks kicked the tires on Smart over the summer. So
yeah,
For what?
Yeah, it was part of the Emmanuel Quickley trade, which did not materialize.
Yes.
Which I'm really happy about because seeing Emmanuel Quickley in Boston would have given me ulcers. Bogdanovich. I've seen this name floated around a lot. And I get it because Bogdanovich is a really good player. The problem, he's not running an offense. That's not his role. He's not a point guard. He's not a floor general. He is someone who can really function more as a secondary ball handler. He does a lot of really good things, but he'd be miscast in this role. And that would be, hey, you're taking a really good player. Money probably doesn't work out either, but also maybe he's a point guard. And the answer is he's just really not. It's not where he's functioned. And at his age, he's not going to change into a player. You can't really change your stripes. D'Angelo Russell, he's got a player option that he is all but guaranteed to acquire. Fun fact about Russell, he was given an automatic no trade clause or de facto no trade clause because of the contract he signed.
The Ron Baker.
But Russell is the first player to waive that immediately. So he can be dealt anywhere, which is fascinating. So they said, we'll give you a lot of money, but in return, we have the right to move you wherever. And D'Angelo Russell took the money and isn't looking back. No shade, but that's where we're at. But he's just not a Knicks fit in a lot of ways. And Colin Sexton, also not really a Knicks fit. He does some things well, but it's not quite in the same way that we need him to be. That we can maybe talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, he probably deserves a longer. I agree with you. Not an Knicks fit for a variety of reasons. Probably deserves a longer conversation, but
yeah. And Jordan Clarkson, who is making a good amount of money this year. It's like $23 million, I believe. And then the following 2 years, I think it's a 2-year, $28 million contract. So the fact that he's
low?
earning,
Is that what they got him on?
Yeah,
I'll double check it now. Yeah,
it's low, and it was a good deal for them. But the fact that he's earning very little next season impacts what the Knicks can do. And when you're stacking salary in the event of a larger trade, you have to consider, okay, well, if the Knicks, let's say they got someone like Jordan Clarkson and they were to trade one of their younger players that still happens to be on the roster that's signed through next season, they still need more money on top of that to get a star. And now they could use one of the traded player exceptions to acquire someone who's under contract next year for, say, like $5 million. But the list of viable players who are available, who are earning around that much, is actually pretty small. So it's not to say they absolutely shouldn't sign or they shouldn't trade for any of these players. They could. There just have to be more steps that come with this, at least one more. Whereas if you acquired players in the other slide who are earning above $20 million, and it's not quite 20 million, it's a little bit above that, but you get the point. 20 is a nice round number. That is easier for you with having to stack those salaries. So not against these players, but they're much lower on the list of priorities because of where we're at. And you also talk about playing time. Some of them probably wouldn't be thrilled with the amount of time that would be given to them in that role. Some might, but yeah.
I was going to say, hovering over all of this is the fact that if you get, maybe there's one or two exceptions on your list, but I'm not sure if there is. All of these are the sorts of players who would require, like, basically the minimum would be the Emmanuel Quickley usage here. And for a few of the players that you've mentioned on this slide and the last slide, if they got Emmanuel Quickley's minutes, that would represent a career low for them. Now, that is not to say that that in and of itself would make the Knicks, gun shy about making the right deal, if they felt it was the right deal. But that's a thing out there. And then the other part of this, and again, it gets into what the packages are for whoever is they're getting. If you get a guy who is going to you're going to give 25 minutes a game to, I'm just going to say there's no time for Quentin Grimes. So is Quentin Grimes part of the trade? And I don't know if this is something that you're getting to. If I spoiled something, I apologize. We could edit this.
No, that's fine. That's totally fine. But it's also not like the Knicks have their pick of the litter, right? The teams that employ these players can decline trades. Other teams will certainly be interested in some of these players. I guarantee that at least two of the players that we've talked about in this slide and the one before will be traded. it's not as easy as, oh, the Knicks should just get this player and then it's done. But something to consider. So these are names that we can spell out. Now, I want to compare player A versus player B in a few different areas.
I hate these.
First, you hate these? That's fair.
Because you're going to feel like an idiot.
Not necessarily.
Yes, you're going to feel like an idiot. Yes.
So this is courtesy of Basketball Index. We're going to go through a few different categories here. But number one is finishing. You could see that in terms of rim shot creation, these two players match up very well. And in fact, when it comes to driving, assist making, rim shot quality, finishing especially, they're very close, generally speaking. The biggest difference here is player B has a higher drive, foul, drawn rate percentage this season. Okay, fine.
Player B has a higher drive, foul rate. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so this is, but they're very similar in this sense. That's finishing. One-on-one. Again, you see very similar in terms of the percentiles that they are in, right? Both are very good with stable isolation. They're really good with floaters, which we know the Knicks like quite a bit. Their mid-range pull-up has been quite good this year. Player A has done a much better job with the shot making from the mid-range and also mid-range talent in general. But one-on-one, this is where they match up. Player A gets the edge a bit, but it's still very close. Perimeter shooting. Player B wins this category, but not by a ton. 3-point percent shooting, player B definitely grades out at a higher percentile. And the quality of shots that this player takes too, that's great. The largest one is the catch and shoot 3-point shot making. That is a very large disparity. Player B ranks 86.8 percentile. Player A, 46.1 percentile. So huge discrepancy there. And then there's the playmaking aspect where both grade out very well with assisted points per 75 possessions, their passing creation volume, all important. Player B is probably a more efficient and versatile passer as the numbers dictate, but player A, their creation quality from passing is certainly higher. That's something player B does a very poor job of. And playmaking talent, they're ranked about the same. So I've gone through 4 categories. John, would you like to guess just who player A is?
No, I don't. There's zero part of me that wants to guess it.
Well, I'm going to hold you to one answer. It's okay if you're wrong. I get these wrong a lot, so it's fine.
Is it someone that's been on one of these slides?
It could very well be.
Jesus Christ. Okay, Tibbs. Could be. I literally have zero. Okay. Is it a point guard?
Well, he was on this slide. He was on a slide that we've seen.
Go back one slide. I want to see something about the catch and shoot thing. Colin Sexton.
Colin Sexton's your answer?
Sure.
Colin Sexton is not the right answer. The right answer is Dejounte Murray. So, as reported, the Knicks were among several teams who have expressed exploratory trade interest in Hawks guard Dejounte Murray. That's what Hoops Hype, Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype, said on December 22nd, 2023. This Hawks team isn't working. They are 14-20. They've got the 28th best defensive rating, which could also be looked at as the third worst.
The third worst.
There are questions, I'm sure, about the fit with Quinn Snyder. When you come from Utah and you see all of that shooting around a rim protector and you see Dejounte Murray, probably doesn't fit exactly what your vision is. Not that it's got to be the same as what was used in Utah, but imagine there's some similarities there. Now, the Hawks extended Dejounte Murray this offseason with what I believe would be one goal in mind, which is we want to trade him. Because if they didn't, then they would have been trading an expiring free agent, and they worry about that free agent just walking. But now the team that acquires him knows that they will have multiple years of team control. And of course, they being the Hawks, had talked to the Knicks about Quentin Grimes. Knicks said no, traded Kevin Knox for Cam Reddish instead. Quick peek of the Hawks 24-25 finances. They're projected to have $163.2 million, 163.3, excuse me. They have 12 players that are under contract next year, includes 2 non-guaranteed deals. Projected luxury tax is $172 million. So that's about $8.7 million in space. If they want to keep Saddiq Bey, he would need to be re-signed. That would also impact the 2 first-round picks that the Hawks have. So those three players probably cost around $20 million. When you're adding that certainly gets you over that tax apron where the Hawks have never wanted to spend. So being in that region is not what they would want. And of course, if there were a difference between Murray and Grimes, it would be $21.2 million next season. So there's a cost reason for why that would make sense. Let's talk about the trade. We mentioned this on the live stream. So if you watch the live stream, this isn't super new, but as a refresher, I had some additional thoughts that I wanted to add. So the Hawks would receive Dejounte Murray. This was from the original trade. The Hawks got Dejounte Murray.
This is the trade that brought Murray to the Hawks.
Correct. And in turn, they gave up Danilo Gallinari, the Hornets first round pick that will likely not convey as a first round pick, but instead 2 second round picks. They give up their own 2025 first, a pick swap in 2026, and their own 2027 first. And then here's where the Knicks, what they would receive in this fake trade. Dejounte Murray, Wesley Matthews is because we're trading two players out, and the Hawks would receive Evan Fournier, expiring salary. Quentin Grimes, the Detroit first that will materialize likely in 2026 or 2027.
Could be a nice pick.
It could. The Bucks pick 2025 and cash $1 million because that would make it even. I presented this on the live stream, as I said, but here's the beauty of being able to say something and then doing research and thinking about things and taking a step back. And here's where I'm at. I think this trade could still be an option, certainly. But purely from a transactional standpoint, this does not feel like something the Knicks have done in the past. Now, the trade that they made for OG Anunoby, completely different from what they've done before. But when it comes to deadlines, what the Knicks typically do is take expiring salary that's out of the rotation, adding draft equity, and adding any other salary filler of like a young player that's also on an expiring contract that works. With Derrick Rose, the real main piece was Kevin Knox in terms of the salary. When it came to Cam Reddish, it was Dennis Smith Jr. And now at this time, it was Kevin Knox. When they traded for Josh Hart, they used Cam Reddish's salary going out. So it doesn't feel like taking Quentin Grimes, who's not an expiring piece, plus all these picks when we know the Knicks are looking for a star to get, even if this is a better player, that player. It just feels very un-Knick-like, but we can roll with it. I'll get your thoughts in just a minute. So again, why Dejounte? Well, here are the pros. Number one, he's got a very strong EPM, especially on the defensive side, but also when you watch him, the off-ball defense is just very lackluster. Yep. He's 19th in drives per game. Obviously, the Knicks have liked players that cut to the rim. He's got an excellent assist percentage, but a lot of the assist percentage depends on your players making those shots. So it's a little hard to analyze that. It's not a cheap contract, all things considered. I mean, when you look at earning an average of like $25 million a year, give or take, it's a little more, but let's rock with it. That's pretty good considering a potential cap spike in 2025 and all of that. Even if they're smoothing out the cap, there's more money that's going to be injected into the league. That's a good contract to have. And he's elite at deflections. He was first overall a couple seasons ago. He's consistently ranked, I believe, in the top 20. So he does stuff on that end. And this year, he's been a great pull-up three shooter.
Yes.
I say this year. Years past, been pretty abysmal. So you hope that that's a consistent thing going forward. But if anything, it kind of feels like, this might be a bit of a different thing. It might be abnormal. And then when you look at the cons, less efficient than the Knicks like. He really doesn't have that level of efficiency. Is a low 3-point attempt frequency in general. This year he's been fine, okay, but still not right where the Knicks want it to be. He's a poor spot up shooter. Again, as we saw earlier, he ranked, I think it was less than the 50th percentile in terms of spot up from three. There's significant overlap with Brunson. How you play the two of them together is certainly a question. The starting lineup problem. Dante DiVincenzo talked about how this starting lineup is gelling, and he's absolutely right. They are playing fantastic basketball. If you bring in Dejounte Murray, are you bringing him off the bench? It would certainly be a preference of mine. It's not a realistic one as well, because you're not saying a clutch, hey, let's let bygones be bygones. Let's trade for Dejounte Murray and bring him off the bench. It doesn't feel like something that actually happens in reality. So you're now putting a piece that's ill-fitting next to Brunson with Dejounte Murray and taking out Dante DiVincenzo in this case. So don't love that. Question of egos involved. I don't know Dejounte Murray personally. There are reports, of course, about how he operates, where his mind might be. I don't know if he would love not being the guy. Granted, he's played well with Trae Young, and Trae Young has certainly been the guy in Atlanta. So it's less about that, and it's more about if Tom Thibodeau thinks Dejounte Murray doesn't have it to close games, is that going to be a problem for Dejounte Murray? I would imagine it would be. He's a former All-Star. I don't think someone like him in his prime saying, I'm not there to close games is going to necessarily mesh with what he wants. And he's a clutch client where maybe, again, the hatchet gets buried and you have it there, but it's still worth a concern. And so the way I see it, and I'll turn it over to you, John, with Dejounte, the vision lines up. You get that point guard that does a lot of what you want, not everything, but a lot of it. And the goal is you coalesce some of your weaker, so to speak, picks, although I think that Pistons pick is still going to be pretty decent. And you try to trade, you consolidate them to then get a better player that you hope when a star becomes available means you have less on the back end pick wise because you've already spent some picks getting this player involved. But that player has to fit not just from a contract standpoint, but also next to Jalen Brunson, next to Julius Randle, not mess with the functionality of the starting lineup. Maybe if Deuce McBride still gets minutes, who knows? I mean, I would gather he would in this case because if you're sending Quentin Grimes out, that fills a role. How is he going to play next to Dejounte? So if the biggest question here is how is Dejounte going to fit on the court with all of these different players, you then have to ask yourself, is he the best option moving forward? And that's something that, in a more established cap or no cap like this, I could have elaborated on. I said I didn't like to fit in the live stream, but it's not like I could take as much time in a less frantic, let's say, environment to talk it through. But I am very worried about how he fits into that purely from a basketball standpoint. That is where I'm at. John, what are your thoughts?
You're still going to ask me who player B is, right?
I am, yes.
Okay,
but if you want to talk about Dejounte Murray.
Yes, I do. You said everything I would say. I'm concerned about the fit. And at the same time, and I wrote a newsletter on Murray this week. I remain high on Grimes. I remain probably higher on Grimes than most. The one thing I wrote in the newsletter that I think is worth at least keeping in mind is the opportunity cost of trading Grimes, who is ostensibly your last premium young asset, to how premium he really is and how much more premium, that's not really a proper phrase, premium he's going to get.
Sure.
So much better. Is up for debate, but that gives me some pause. The thing that I cannot get past is how you can possibly make any determination like definitively or even close to definitively about what his fit would be here under the guise of didn't work with one small defensively lacking point guard in Atlanta. Why would it work with another small defensively lacking point guard in New York when Trae Young is just such a unique basketball presence and personality that I don't know that it is fair to draw like say it's apples to apples. And I mean, it's wild to say this about the Knicks, but like they have been, I think, a more welcoming culture than not if you do the things that like Thibodeau wants you to do. And will Murray do those things? Will Murray buy in? I again, you don't know him. I don't know him. There's enough question marks there to me where if this trade went down, I would understand it. I would root for it. I would actually be hopeful that there was a world even trading off of Dante DiVincenzo's catch and shoot brilliance, and he is nothing short of brilliant in catch and shoot from every perspective. Shot difficulty, shot length, like all those sorts of things. Even with that trade-off, I do think that there's a world where their starting lineup would actually be better like balancing both sides. Like we talked about how great that DiVincenzo's been off the ball, being able to get in passing lanes and all that. Like that is the one thing that Murray can do, and he does it very well. So like, all that being said, I'd be leery for all the reasons you talked about. Yeah.
And the reason it's not working in Atlanta isn't necessarily because Brunson, Trae Young, and Dejounte Murray can't work together. It just has to do with a lot of other roster construction issues as well. But that's certainly important. All of what you're saying. Yes, I agree. But let's talk about the one red paperclip once again, which we've talked about in the past, where you start from something small and you get to where you need to go to. Getting Murray would not be because the Knicks see him as a mainstay. It would be, we really want to turn what we have into Dejounte Murray, and then Dejounte Murray and other assets into player X. And that's essentially where we're at, where it would be the goal of flipping him because you don't necessarily need him and Brunson moving forward, especially assuming that the Knicks do have someone like Rokas who can be very cheap. And I'm not saying Rokas is a better player than Dejounte Murray. Obviously not. But depending on role and what you can turn Murray into, all of that. That's the process. But you might be thinking, well, Jeremy, why would the Knicks do this for Murray, let alone any player? Because it just feels weird that you're talking about Knicks acquiring a player and then trying to flip him 6 months down the line. It just, that doesn't feel very realistic to me. And to that, I would say Brock Aller's past precedence tells us a different story. So past acquisitions, for example, the Knicks acquired Ed Davis and 2 second-round picks into cap space in the very first offseason that they had with this new regime. And then they subsequently traded him to Minnesota for a second-round pick. So they used their cap space for 3 second-round picks. Cam Reddish. Oops. Pardon me. Something came up on my computer. No, not Cam. No disrespect to Cam. It was my computer where something came up and it shifted the screen and I was worried for a second. Cam Reddish, he was acquired and then he was reportedly included in trade talks for the Lakers and the Raptors, really going to LA, but in that deal about 3 weeks later. And then, of course, the 2022 13th pick overall, Jalen Duren. The Knicks traded out of 11. They would never trade out of a pick. They would never trade into the draft. They would never do both at the same time. Well, they did. They traded that pick and Kemba Walker for the 2025 first round pick that is from Milwaukee. So it's not like they can't say, we're good, we're going to keep this player because we just acquired them. It's, we will do any means necessary, or with any means necessary, we will get what we want. And if we have to wait, we'll wait. But we're going to use these pieces because we can. So but one last thing on the Murray conversation. Let's say someone like Embiid becomes available. You never know, but let's just say he does. That's where Murray comes into play with the Lakers. And so the thought that I had been operating under wasn't necessarily, hey, let's just get Murray on this team and then move him to, say, the Sixers. And the Sixers, maybe they trade him similarly to how when the Blazers got Jrue Holiday for Damian Lillard, they didn't keep Jrue Holiday. They traded him right away. But it puts the burden also on the Sixers to figure it out with Murray. That's where I thought the Lakers coming into play would make a lot of sense. Because if you had a 3-team trade this upcoming summer, you could say, hey, Los Angeles, you got a 2029 first round pick. Wouldn't it be great if you use that pick to get Dejounte Murray? And the whole point being, if you're the Knicks, you could trade 2025, 2027, the rest of your protected picks, and then the Lakers fill in the gap with the 2029 because all these star trades have at least 3 unprotected firsts. So it would be a way to turn Grimes and 2 protected picks into an unprotected pick. But there's a lot of pressure because the Knicks would need to hope that the Lakers don't do anything, that they want Dejounte Murray and haven't found another solution, and that no other team would necessarily be in the position. Because if the goal is getting that distant first out of there that the Knicks don't have to do and can pay more on the front end than the back end, there aren't a lot of teams that might be able to cover that. So that's why with this whole idea, it's a little challenging. But that's where the thought was. It's just a lot that's out of New York's control versus maybe going in a different direction, keeping the overwhelming majority of the picks and assessing from there.
And if it's not Embiid, like this, you could plug a different star player into this construction and still send Murray to the Lakers, and the Lakers send, picks and whatever else to wherever they're going. Exactly.
But again, it's so much can happen that if you were to do this, you really need the Lakers to play along, and maybe they don't. Maybe they found another solution. Are you ready to guess?
No, I was going to say, but I wonder if like this whole thing about the peace brokering between Clutch and CAA or Leon, whatever. It could just be explicitly, because obviously Clutch knows exactly what the Lakers are doing. CAA knows exactly what the Knicks are doing. If it could be explicitly like, hey, do you guys want Dejounte over the summer? We realize there's no path for you to get Dejounte right now. But let's work together and let's help each other out for both of our unique interests. And Dejounte gets to spend, 40 games here in New York or whatever it is.
No, it's an excellent point. Are you ready to guess who player B is?
Michael Jeffrey Jordan. No, Donovan Mitchell.
Donovan Mitchell. Okay. It is not Donovan Mitchell. It is Malcolm Brogdon.
Okay.
So let's talk about the pros of Malcolm Brogdon. He's got a strong EPM as well. He's 40th in drives per game, but plays fewer minutes, so it makes sense. He's got an excellent assist percentage, but again, like we talked about with Murray, that depends on your players making shots. He is a free agent in 2025, whereas Murray is under contract for longer, and that is a value contract. If you're a team that, say, next summer, or to get a player and you just want expiring money, that certainly helps fit the bill. He's got a high 3-point assist frequency. He's also shooting lights out from three. He's an excellent spot up shooter, as we talked about. I think it was the 89.8th percentile of how good he was. And the starting lineup could stay because you could slot Brogdon into a backup role. And the reason you could do that is Brogdon's comfortable coming off the bench. He won the 6th Man of the Year award last year over Emmanuel Quickley while he was with the Boston Celtics. In terms of cons, he's had trouble staying healthy. He's had some injury issues. He's had leg issues, foot problems. But I think the benefit there is if you're acquiring someone like Brogdon and he has to miss games, who happens to be ready? Deuce McBride. So the Knicks do have a level of insurance that they, could still afford. They also wouldn't have to give up someone like Quentin Grimes or as many picks to get Dejounte Murray as they would for getting someone like Malcolm Brogdon. And again, a con, Clutch client. But Malcolm Brogdon is a very interesting case. Do you know why he is an interesting case, John?
No, I don't, but you'll tell me.
I will. Malcolm Brogdon might be a Clutch client, but he was with CAA for ages. So if there were a player that the Knicks, specifically Leon Rose, have a level of comfortability with, it would be Malcolm Brogdon.
Pause for 30 seconds. I'm going to move so we don't have to rush.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're almost done, by the way. Yeah, I'd give it 10 more minutes. Maybe 15.
It's fine, though. I'm sure Andrew's going to love it. Okay. Calm down. Hold on.
Sorry, just so you know, I'm not able to read the private chat when I go into presenting mode. So I didn't know that you had.
Oh, it's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Ready?
Wait, what did we stop at before I
say CAA? The CAA clutch thing.
Sure. Do you want to address being or me to address being in a new location?
Yeah, sure. You can do it.
Okay. All right. Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. Speaking of trading places, I see, John, you have moved. Is that a ducky above your head to the right?
It's some sort
left,
of,
I guess.
It's a chick.
It's a chick. Okay.
It's a chick.
All right. So
no symbolism whatsoever. Although hawk is a bird.
It could be. Yeah. It's not a crow anymore. But so that's where we're at in terms of Malcolm Brogdon. And when you look at the Blazers' finances, Next season, they're projected to have $161.3 million in salary. It's a very large payroll for a rebuilding team. For context, they would not be a cap space team whatsoever, but all of the tanking teams that are around them would be. So if you're Portland, you probably want some level of flexibility here. They've got 12 players under contract next season. That includes 2 non-guaranteed deals. The projected luxury tag is $172 million. They're $10.7 million below that as things stand. They have 2 first-round picks and they have 2 high second-round picks. If they use all of them, it'd probably be in the ballpark of $12 to $18 million added to their payroll on top of the $161 million. So it stands to reason that moving off of Brogdon and getting expiring salary makes a whole lot of sense for them. Now, the other thing, and this is, again, another thing that bothers me, it sticks in my craw because it happens before I'm able to present it. Mention in the group chat that we have with KFS on Friday. Look at the Blazers over the next few days because it'll be really interesting to see if they waive any of their non-guaranteed players like Ishmael Wainwright or Skylar Mays. And lo and behold, John, what did they do on Saturday? They waived both of those players, opening up not 1, but 2 roster spots. Typically, if you're a team that is opening up those level of roster spots, it's because you are going to do some sort of 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 trade. And if you're looking to move off of salary, and the main players that they would be moving are Malcolm Brogdon and Jeremy Grant. Maybe they don't move both of them. Maybe they just move one of them. But they're going to move one of them at least, because why would they go into the tax to be a terrible team?
There's no universe where Malcolm Brogdon can be on the Blazers next season unless they want to move one of Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp, or who's the third guy? Anthony Simons. And I understand you're saying, all right, well, maybe it's Simons that goes. As far as I know, they are as high on him continuing to be part of their lineage of the next great Blazers team or whatever nonsense they tell themselves over there. Like, I don't think that's changed. So, like, Scoot's not going to be playing whatever he's playing right now, 18 or 20 or 22 minutes. Like, he's going to be a 30-plus minute a year player next year. And, like, Brogdon has to move. You're going to get more value for him now than you would this summer because the team gets an extra half a year with him. Like, he's going to get traded before, unless they completely bungle the situation and they just ask for way too much. But, like, any reasonable projection of what's going on with them says that they're going to move him before the deadline. It's just a matter of where.
Exactly. And that it's all part of the Damian Lillard trade tree where you've done very nicely for yourself. You then, turn Dame into Drew Holiday and a lot of other assets. And then you turn Drew Holiday into Malcolm Brogdon and got some assets out of that. So now you could trade Brogdon and get other assets, and you keep kind of going back to that tree. So the trade or trades that I would present, the Knicks receive Malcolm Brogdon, and they would also receive the draft rights to an unsigned player. I will have more on that in a moment. The Blazers would receive Evan Fournier, Malachi Flynn, and now I really went back and forth on this. I ultimately went with the Bucks first round pick, and I'll tell you why. I originally had this slated as the Wizards first, right? Because it's human nature that we would want to give up a pick that is very low in terms of value. Obviously, Chris, our very own Chris Persianen, reported that the Knicks have been interested or checked in on Brogdon, that the Magic are another team that has checked in on Brogdon. When you look at the Magic and their assets, their salary, everything, they could conceivably trade, if we're talking expiring salary, to help the Blazers get what we've laid out, Jonathan Isaac. They could clear his money off the books fully, non-guaranteed next season. In terms of picks, if you're the Blazers, you don't want the 2024 pick from Orlando because you already have 2 firsts and 2 high seconds. So we're talking future picks. Okay. Well, Orlando probably doesn't want to give one of their own picks that are further out because then that could just make things messy. But that does leave the Nuggets first round pick, which they own in next year's draft. So my thought process was, if you got to a situation and you're the Knicks where the best offer, and maybe the Magic don't offer this, but let's say they do, it's Jonathan Isaac and the Nuggets first round pick, you can't go in there with this package of Fournier and Flynn and offer the Wizards first.
No.
Now, if the Magic decide not to offer the Nuggets first, then by all means, push your luck with the Wizards first. But the market dynamics here, it tells me if there's going to be some sort of bidding war, you're going to have to give up something else. And it's not going to be the Pistons first because that's a little too valuable for a player like Brogdon. It's not going to be the Mavs first for the same reason that it wouldn't be the Magic first. So that leaves you with one protected first round pick that doesn't impact your Stepien, which is the Bucks pick. So that's how I landed on that.
Remind me, all the Bulls picks are gone from the Vooch trade?
Correct.
Okay.
They expired.
I always forget that.
This past draft. Yeah.
So I would say that if you there comes a point where, despite what I just said literally 5 minutes ago, if the packages are so like underwhelming, at that point, and only at that point, if you're Portland, would you just keep him into the summer and just wait and see if a better trade package develops during the summer? So I think if you're the Knicks, almost not regardless of whether Orlando gets involved, but like almost regardless, you're going to need to pony up the Bucks pick.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying. I don't think that they would hang on to him through the deadline for the salary reasons, because then they have to figure out a way to cut money, which is then figuring out ways to dump salary. Yeah. But also, they want to lose games. They want to spend the rest of the season developing. Removing good talent helps you lose games and maximize your odds. So I could see them trying to do that. Now, some of you out there are certainly especially perceptive when it comes to CBA and salary and all that. And you might be thinking, well, Jeremy, why is it like, how can you add Fournier and Flynn in a trade when there are aggregation rules? Because the Knicks acquired Malachi Flynn. They can't flip him and pair him with other players. And I think if you did say that, congratulations. I'm glad you're catching on. Well, you would split the trade up into two, just like with the RJ Barrett, OG Anunoby trade and the Emmanuel Quickley, Precious Achiuwa, and Malachi Flynn trade, so that it's two different deals. The first would be Fournier and the pick for Brogdon. The second would be Malachi Flynn going into a traded player exception that the Blazers have that will expire very soon. Now, the rule is you have to trade something of substance in order for it to work out. And what is of substance? It's cash. It's second round. It's some sort of second round pick. It could be conditional, or it's the rights to a draft and stash. Don't see it being cash in this case because the money is about even. It's like $200,000 off, $250,000, something like that. It's very close. I don't see it being a second round pick because the Blazers don't have a ton to spare and they don't really want to necessarily tie all that up. But they do have several draft picks that are still in the books they have not signed. So it's something to say of, yeah, we're just adding this in to make it work. Would I prefer a second round pick? Of course, I absolutely would. I just don't necessarily see the Blazers going quite in that direction. So to check off the boxes, that's where insert your international player who has been unsigned there. Now, Chris said something very similar to this trade, which I liked quite a bit. And he added this in his thread. The one thing that was not there, that was there but wasn't mentioned, happened to be that it generates a trade player exception, not just for the Blazers by doing this, but also for the Knicks. So by moving Fournier and that pick to Portland for Brogdon, then the Blazers get a trade player exception of $3.6 million. But then, because the Knicks are dumping Flynn into the other traded player exception that Portland has, they get their own $3.9 million exception, give or take. So it's another way to open up salary. It's kind of, it checks off all the boxes. The Knicks get Malcolm Brogdon, a backup point guard that they need. They get the rights to a player to satisfy a second trade that they have to split up for cap reasons. The Blazers get expiring salary ×2 with Fournier and Flynn, but they can give Flynn those backup minutes that he certainly wouldn't get here in New York, similar to how they actually ran Ryan Arcidiacono last year when Josh Hart was traded from Portland to the Knicks. And then they could say, we got another first round pick out of this. It'd probably be in the mid to late 20s. It's not the one that the Knicks initially wanted to give up, but of all of the draft picks that they have, If it's not going to be the Wizards one, it makes the most sense to trade. Your thoughts?
Fair trade from a value perspective. I think Brogdon makes a lot of sense from a fit perspective and from a fit perspective, from a what the Knicks like, what the Knicks are looking for perspective. Obviously, you're keeping Grimes out of the deal. Not my guess. I would be utterly shocked if the Knicks would they would rather keep Grimes and give up the first than the other way around. The only question I have is the minutes thing, which is like, okay, Brogdon's averaging what, 27 this year. He's routinely averaged over 30 in his career. He'll come here. I think he'd be okay, given that it's a situation where he could actually do a little bit of winning and be in the playoffs, which he's not going to be this year for sure. I'm sure he'd be okay playing 24 minutes a night. So where are those 24 minutes coming from? That's the tough part. So I think, let me.
I don't know if it is. I think it probably means that Deuce gets relegated back to situational.
Without question, that's the case. So let's take 12. So Deuce is playing. I mean, I don't know what he's played since the trade. Let's call it that you're getting maybe 10 minutes from Deuce. Mm-hmm. Let's call it that you're gonna ease the burden on Brunson. So maybe you're getting 5 from Brunson. So there's 15-ish right there. And then so you have another 8, 9, 10 minutes to you take a little bit from Grimes, a little bit from DiVincenzo, a little bit from Hart, and that's and we've seen in I think all 4 games since the trade, correct me if I'm wrong, we've seen Hart at the 2 lineups. Now I think Tibbs likes the Hart at the 2 lineups. I think he feels like it gives him a look. We could quibble about the spacing. We could quibble about that. It's clog toilet offense. There is something about that group that works. The size, the defense. Like there's a reason he's going to it. And it's not just because he has a hard on for Josh Hart, pun intended. You like that? I did. But I guess you know what? Now that I'm talking it out, and here's the ultimate tiebreaker for me, and I think ultimately why I would choose this over the Murray deal. This is just me. Reasonable minds may differ. If, God forbid, I shouldn't say God forbid, Jalen Brunson's a 6 foot tall point guard. The notion that he's going to play 82 fucking games is nonsense. I understand he's played every game this year. How many players play every game during an NBA season? 5, 10 at most.
Yeah.
The notion that Jalen Brunson is not going to miss games of consequence between now and the end of the year is baloney. Malcolm Brogdon can come in and play 35 minutes for you if you need. And you're not going to skip a beat. And if you're like, all right, so you're going to upend your team for the possibility that someone misses games. A, it's not a possibility. It's going to happen. B, you're not upending your team. And C, it makes sense with everything else you're doing. This is good.
Over his last 15 games, Jalen Brunson has averaged 36.5 minutes per game.
Yeah.
So you need someone to take a little bit of that pressure off. And the other thing about Brogdon that's different from Murray, if it's not just the bench role, I mean, that's a crucial part for sure.
Oh, it's a massive fucking part.
If Brogdon were to get the Emmanuel Quickley treatment of, say, 24 minutes per game, if he put up a stink, no one would really care. And I don't think he would, to be quite honest. If Dejounte Murray came here and averaged 24 minutes per game, you would hear about it everywhere. And that would happen. So many issues. Right. But that goes into the line of bringing one player in versus the other. So that's how I see with Malcolm Brogdon. I just want to quickly go over Colin Sexton because just very briefly so we can say that we talked about it.
One last thing on Brogdon, very, 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 very quickly. And this is going to be a weird thing to say, but it's actually a benefit that he gets injured a lot because you could go and you could tell Deuce and you could tell Grimes, you're still this guy's not playing the rest of the games that he's here. You're gonna still get your increased opportunities. Sorry.
No, you're 100% correct. In terms of Colin Sexton, a strong offensive EPM. He's 56th in drives per game, but again, he's coming off the bench too. Good assist percentage, but we've talked about assist percentage. Decent 3-point attempt frequency. The starting lineup can stay because you'd have Sexton off the bench. Cons, not a strong defender whatsoever. In fact, could categorize his DEPM as weak. And the Knicks would need more salary in any trade this upcoming summer. If something materialized, they'd have to add more with that TPE, which, as we talked about, is a little difficult. There are multiple years under contract where if you like Sexton, that's great. If you don't like Sexton, it's like with Rozier, where like, okay, so you're telling me we have to take on this contract now. And of course, he is a clutch client. And then the last thing I want to do, we talked about spot up shooting, but I just want to dive into Knicks players and targets and all of that just for more comparison. There have been 222 players who have taken at least 50 spot up or catch and shoot threes this year. And this is where they rank on that list of 222. Brunson is 14th. DiVincenzo is 46th. Grimes is 79th. Anunoby is 99th. Flynn is 129th. Hart, 178th. Randall, 201st. That's where they stand. And we know that Randall not being a great catch and shoot player, it's an issue. It's something that will probably come to the forefront more as we go along. But he does so many other things that it's okay. You can manage, you can get around it. And if you're saying he's here to stay for this season, which he would be, then it's finding the pieces that kind of fit through that. Now, let's talk about some other players. Let's start with Malcolm Brogdon. He is second out of 222 players. He is second on that list. Colin Sexton, 28th. And I'm going to throw a sneak attack here. Emmanuel Quickley. He was 59th, but just goes to show the Knicks certainly liked what he had to offer on that sense. It was just all part of the business. Dejounte Murray, 130th. Then we have RJ Barrett, 139th. I get it. He's not a point guard. It was more just players coming out, players going in, just for context. Terry Rozier, 165th. Jordan Clarkson, 198th. So when you consider, it's not just spot up shooting, right? If it were just spot up shooting, then Tyler Hero, who's number one, would be the ultimate prize. But it's configuring, how do we add spacing and high frequency shooting to a team that really enjoys these types of players and that would better fit around the talent that we have? Because if Jalen Brunson does miss a game, to your point, John, and you have Malcolm Brogdon and Julius Randle still is playing, who fits really well around him? Someone who's a high spot up shooter, which is Brogdon. Sexton to a degree. We saw how good Quickley was with Brunson, Quickley, Hart, and Randle. Murray is not quite that same level. So you don't have the benefit of a center who spaces the floor quite in the same way. Terry Rozier and Jordan Clarkson so far down the list that it just becomes somewhat problematic. So we'll wrap up here in conclusion. Based on the fit and the cost, I would go with Brogdon over Murray. You've got the perimeter shooting, you have the playmaking, you have the floater. Another aspect that I think should be noteworthy, the Knicks have gravitated, not for their whole team, but for a lot of them, towards players who come from rigorous, established collegiate programs, right? When you think of, obviously, Villanova, you think of Kentucky, but it's more than that. Quentin Grimes came from Houston, which very well-established program. OG Anunoby came from Indiana with Tom Crean. There's a lot of overlap with Tom Crean's coaching, Tom Thibodeau. They're kind of cut from the same cloth. Deuce McBride with Bob Huggins. I mean, that while Huggins was there, it was a revered program. So it's not everyone, but they like having that level of, who's a great coach. Even when you look this summer, if Embiid became available, Bill Self at Kansas. If Donovan Mitchell became available, it was Rick Pitino at Louisville. If Devin Booker became available, spoiler, he won't be, Kentucky, John Calipari. So when you're talking about Malcolm Brogdon, who comes from Tony Bennett's UVA program, versus someone like Dejounte Murray, who came from University of Washington, no shade on University of Washington. They're going to be playing a pretty big football game as you listen to this tonight. There's just a difference in terms of pedigree from a collegiate standpoint. I think there's also an upstanding character thing where that's not a shot at Dejounte Murray. It's more praising Malcolm Brogdon, who has been very involved with the NBPA. So I just feel as though they're, from a culture and character standpoint, which I can't fully speak to since I don't know these people, But on paper, it feels like there's more of a fit there too. And again, I'm not against the Dejounte Murray vision. I talked about it. There's still positives that are here. It just feels less practical when you think about coalescing the picks and if they need to come in handy this summer or in a future summer. The whole bottom line here, though, is get a good point guard that works, who's under contract next year, who you can have as continuous soup and give you flexibility. So that rules out the players who are 2024 free agents. And then finally, the Knicks love their depth. And there's something to be said of keeping them to avoid vulnerability on the back end. So if you walk into this upcoming summer and it is under contract, Jalen Brunson, Dante DiVincenzo, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, Malcolm Brogdon, Quentin Grimes, Deuce McBride, Josh Hart, 8 players, plus OG Anunoby and Isaiah Hartenstein. Is anyone I'm leaving out there, John? I don't think I am, but
no.
Those 10. You've got 8 guys under contract and 2 that you fully intend to keep long-term. That's a good place to be in to move money and salary. And also you can say, oh, well, if we had to move one of Deuce or Grimes, it could be one of them. It doesn't have to be, hey, we moved Grimes to get Murray and now we have to move Deuce because the way that the math shakes out, he's included. So you can give yourself more flexibility and more options there. So the more I talk it through, the more Brogdon makes sense to me as that fit. Murray less so, but still there. But really, Brogdon just jack of all trades here.
So I'm going to say something about Murray, and this is going to sound like Murray hate, and I guess it's going to sound like hate towards your Murray idea too, which I don't mean it to.
No, it's fun.
My hesitation with Murray is the same as I think it relates directly to why whenever we talk about, not that we're talking about it right now, but whenever we have talked about it in the past, the idea of trading Julius Randle, and we go through prospective teams and you're like, all right, well, he's not good. Like other teams won't see him as good enough to be a number 2 on their team. So then it's like, all right, well, what if he's somebody's number 3? Well, our team's going to have some hesitation about him being their number 3 because he doesn't have the ideal skill set of a number 3 because of defense and because of shooting. I kind of think you could say the same thing about Murray in the sense that like there's some off-ball concerns with like we just went through he's not an ideal number 3. Let's just say he's not an ideal number 3. You know, there was a world where if
it's Randall, that's the co-partner. I mean, in general, yes, with Murray, but especially.
Oh no, I mean in terms of trade value around the league, the idea that some other team is going to look at Murray as an ideal number 3 because of his size, because he's the size of a guard. He's a long guard, but he's still the size of a guard. And because of the catch and shoot stuff, and he's like not your ideal like spot up shooter. I think those concerns are there. And for that reason, you know, unless he's going to go back to being in another situation like he was on the Spurs, where he's the guy that has the ball in his hands every time, in which case, hey, spoiler alert, you're not going to win a ton of games that way. So he's one of those guys that I think in the way the game is played today and the way teams are structured, talented player, like low level ish all-star fringe upside. But is the trade value really there? To the point where, again, we didn't talk about it explicitly on this pod, and we don't need to get into it, but like if you're Cleveland and you're like, okay, this is the guy we're getting, or this is who we're going to ostensibly replace Donovan Mitchell with, like, how are you feeling about that if you're the Cavs? I don't know if they're going to be in love with that. And again, we don't need to get too deep into that, but for all of these reasons, I agree with you that Murray is the more apt target for right now if they can make it happen. Brogdon. Sorry. Yes. Brogdon.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I'm with you in terms of the resale portion of it with trading players but I think there will be a bit more interest in terms of Murray. I just don't think it will be, but I agree with you that it's a narrower lane than not. Like if you, in this scenario, it's like, you're really hoping the Lakers are interested. If they're not interested, that's, you know, I think there is a team like, the Timberwolves have money issues. The Hawks could look to like, is it Karl Anthony Towns? But the point being there, and it's, you know, I've seen that idea elsewhere. It's not mine, but it's more like if that were the case, you're still able to find something that fits. It's just the hope there is you get enough assets from Minnesota to be able to give you what you're hoping for in, say, a star trade, and Minnesota doesn't really have those at their disposal. And they maybe don't want to give up next summer their furthest pick 7 years out. So it's a trickier situation, and you have more in control when you walk into this summer with all of your picks -1 in this case than all of your picks -2 and Quentin Grimes. So I agree. It's why looking at this, thinking it through, I came to a different conclusion than where I was at, but understanding of the original conclusion and being comfortable with it still.
Yeah. And also great call, and shout out to Chris Persianen for, I think I retweeted his thread on Brogdon a few days ago. So check that out if you haven't seen it. It's spot on. And again, he has some reporting in there about, or like the Knicks have logged interest, and Orlando is expected to kick the tires as well. Good call on the Orlando. And also the very last thing, I wonder if Orlando wouldn't be a little bit more gun shy. I know they have Bataze to step into the Isaac backup center minutes, but like, I feel like Isaac's a big, well, it goes without saying, Isaac is a big part of their team identity than Fournier is for the Knicks, because he has played this year. So I wonder if there wouldn't be, and also then they have Fultz. Are they like just completely done with Fultz? Like, is Fultz going to sit waste away on the bench? Like maybe they try to include Fultz in the street. I don't know. It could be a little bit messy on Orlando's end, to the point that it might give the Knicks a bit more of a lane. But that's it.
You bring up a good point as well, because there was something floated around that Wendell Carter Jr. could also be moved. So we're looking at this through the lens of, hey, maybe the Blazers want to clear the deck with some of their salary, but maybe they don't. Maybe they are comfortable moving Jeremy Grant for expiring money and then using Brogdon to take on some future money. I don't know if Wendell Carter Jr. would make the most sense, but then again, he could as a 4 as opposed to operating as a 5 if they feel he can work with DeAndre Ayton or Robert Williams when he comes back. So can't rule that out either. It can't just be as easy as, oh, well, the Knicks are offering expiring money, so the Magic clearly are too. But I also feel like they're a little bit further along, where is the price going to be too rich for them to do that? Also, they have a lot of guards, to your point, like with Fultz, but they also have Suggs. They have Black. They're adding Brogdon to that. Is that going to cut time away that's necessary? Is it a worthwhile investment? I don't know, but we shall see.
We shall see. Okay. This was great, Jeremy. I'm really happy we did this, especially since I am going to steal a lot of it for the Brogdon newsletter that I have to write this week.
Please do.
Okay. Let's give out some game balls. Okay. We'll finish up here. This will actually be pretty quick because we don't have anybody to put in detention. Given to a player, coach, or entity that stood out this week and deserves special recognition. Our candidates, and as usual, I am literally just reading what Andrew Claudio has typed into the old weekly doc. Julius Randle's stats for this week. How you doing? 30 points a game, 7.3 rebounds, 3.5 assists on 50.6. Not effective field goal percentage. 50.6 field goal percentage, 55.6 effective, and 61.6 true shooting. Jalen Brunson, 27 and 9. Those dogs will hunt on 47% shooting, about 55 effective, and 60 true shooting. Vote. Vote.nba.com. Vote for both of these guys to make the All-Star team. I don't think they're going to get voted in, but I have faith that the coaches will do the right thing. And then last candidates for game ball, Isaiah Hartenstein, 54 rebounds on 12 blocks this week. Josh Hart, plus 60 and 115 minutes this week. And then pick a fifth Nick. Grimes, Dante, OG, even Deuce are all deserving of the fifth spot. Jeremy, you get to go first.
I'm going to go with some dude named Hartenstein. Hartenstein has just been, that scene. When you win, you get to pick first, John. So, and that's where we're at. But wow. All right. There's a chick behind you and you're still flipping the bird. Unprofessional. So yeah, he has been phenomenal. I would imagine that, especially after last night, as I look online, Isaiah Hartenstein, number 1 in defensive EPM in the NBA. I mean, he is one of the best value signed contracts available. He's been great. He is everything that you could want in a backup center who has now come to the forefront. I think saying that he's the best backup center. It's between him and Naz Reid at this point, and he's just been outstanding. So huge part. I shudder to think what this team looks like without him and without Mitch. We don't have to, because he has played in every single game that he has been available for thus far as a Knick, and he's just been outstanding this year. So it has to go to him.
You mother effer. God damn it. Look, Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, it should go without saying they're deserving of this. They each have been deserving of this designation every week, pretty much for the last, I don't know, 2 months now, more or less. Yeah, in Randle's case, because can't believe it's been about 2 months since that early terrible start. I'm going with Deuce. And I almost went with Grimes, and I kind of want. Can I give it to both of them at the same time, since they weren't even on the hard nominations list?
Sure.
It's hard to be a young player, and this is coming from the ultimate Tibbs defender. It's hard to be a young player on a Tibbs roster who doesn't have a set spot, and when you are called to duty, your job is like thankless, and that is because you maybe have a more limited skill set than other young players. The more you do for Tibbs, the more he does for you. Well, if you don't have the total well-rounded game, you're going to be asked to do what you do expertly in limited minutes. That's freaking hard. That is hard. And to be able to stay ready and be able to come in and contribute. And the reason I skewed Deuce before Grimes is at least Grimes is he's never fallen out of the rotation this year. Deuce been sitting on his ass, and then he came in and it was tough, and he had a rough couple games, and everybody was ready to trade for everybody, as we just spent an hour and a half on. And all the dude does is come in and he rights the ship, and he makes it such that you're okay now for a while, and we don't need to go and trade for Malcolm Brogdon tomorrow, and feel like if we don't do that, where the hell are we going to be? This team's not going to be able to survive. So really just impressive stuff. And now that I just bashed Tibbs, I'll give him a little bit of credit. It is I think a reflection of the entire coaching staff and really the entire organization, that they could have a system, culture, situation, whatever you want to say, where young players can come in and be productive in the whole thing. I think that's a healthy sign for an organization, for sure.
Of course. And another thing, in another feather in Deuce's cap, no pun intended, he got paid.
Yes, good job.
So
who could have called that?
I don't know. Not sure.
Detention is usually given to somebody who deserves to sit down and think about what they did for this week. Detention is closed because we do not put people in timeout when the Knicks don't lose. If anybody should go in detention, it is me, because I had the opportunity last week to pick 3-1 or 4-0. Either of those would be great. Nope. Left my cojones at the door on the entrance to the old podcast studio last week, because I get the chicken shit award of the week for picking 1 and 3. Jeremy, you get the week for having picked 2 and 2. You are now 5 and 4. You and Benji and Fred, I guess, are 5 and 4. I'm 4 and 5.
Team effort.
What? Where's my fucking teammate? Huh?
I don't know, Thanos. I mean, it's fine.
Make a pick. The games. Tuesday home. Portland. I know they were feisty for a while. Are they still feisty, or are they not in the feisty category anymore? I don't really know. Thursday at the Mavs. That's an 8:30 start, and then Saturday at the Grizzlies, who we mentioned a little bit earlier. They got off to the hot start after Ja came back. Then they kind of came back down to earth, and now they're, whatever. They're a formidable team. So.
Yeah. So I am going to be bold here. And no, I don't think I'm going to make it hard for you. I think there are 2 realistic options here. At least I would hope. But I'm going to play the odds. My heart says 3-0, but my head says 2-1. So I'm going to go 2-1, and I'll have my cake and eat it too if you decide to go in the direction of 3-0.
I mean, I could do that. Or I could continue to try to be mush and pick 1 and 2.
You could. Your sacrifice would be welcomed.
Would it?
I mean, yeah, if the Knicks keep winning and I keep winning, I mean, that'd be great.
It's hard to win 7 games in a row. It's hard to win on the road in the NBA. It's hard to win on the road against good teams. The Mavs are a good team. I think the Grizzlies are a good team now. Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be mush 1 and 2. Here we go. All
right.
Don't say I didn't do anything for you, folks. Okay. Jeremy, anything before we get out of here?
No, other than I hope Malcolm Brogdon enjoys his first of many games at Madison Square Garden this upcoming week. Maybe we'll see, but no, this was. It's nice that the Knicks are winning, and there's a path to them at the end of this month, as Mensa has talked about, to be higher than the 4th seed, maybe the 3rd seed, maybe even, dare I say, the almighty 2 seed. So we'll see. Game at a time. Focus on Portland.
Where do I sign for a top 5 seed by the end of the year? I know, again, I am a mush. I am PTSD. I am old man yelling at cloud on lawn. I am all of the things. This is still a very, very competitive Eastern Conference, and if you don't believe me, just take one look at the standings right now, where it is still incredibly, incredibly bunched up. If they could get into just get in the top 5, anything else is gravy. 4 seed, 3 seed, 2 seed, gravy. And on that note, Jeremy, this was awesome. Really, really. Again, the biggest compliment that I could ever give you is that you. I mean, I'm someone who thinks about the Knicks basically all day, every day, other than when I'm with my wife and kids. And when you're able to change my mind on something, and I think I was a little bit more. I think I was a little lower on Brogdon before this, and I'm legitimately higher on the prospect of that deal now. So I don't know if anybody else is going to share my opinion, but yeah.
Well, I actually had the same opinion when I first saw Brogdon's name being thrown around. It was kind of discussed. It's like, Malcolm Brogdon, that's really who. And then it's like, let's take a step back. Let's go through the numbers. Let's run it on the court, salary, all that stuff. And it came back pretty glowingly. So I'm glad that it had an impact on you and hopefully other people as well.
Yeah, for sure. We'll see what happens.
Also, you absolutely think of the Knicks when you're with your wife and kids. Let's be real. Because I think about the Knicks when I'm with my family as well. So it's fine.
It depends what I'm doing. If I'm supervising children doing whatever it is they're doing, yes. If I'm trying to have a meaningful interaction to the extent that you could have meaningful interactions with young children. My older daughter, I have very meaningful interactions with her. The little one, she's kind of an invalid. Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, ABJP, for producing this episode. Thanks also to GMAC for stepping in and helping out. And thanks most of all to all of you, our loyal Knicks Film School listeners, for continuing to go on this journey with us. It's been a fun season so far. I have a feeling the season is only going to get more fun and exciting from here. Not that it won't be without some ups and downs, but it's a good time to be a Knicks fan. So thank you for making us your companion as you go through the season. Don't forget, like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the podcast, 5-star rating, leave a little review. All those things help us out. We don't say that lightly. Truly, if you could do any of that, it really does mean a lot to us. Until next time, take care. We'll see you soon. Peace out.